No one else, certainly not the state, will do this for us. Any belief to the contrary at the turn of this nightmare millennium, when federal and corporate powers everywhere are colluding on the backs of their third world slaves, when every paycheck is quickly extinguished on the battlefield before it reaches a single institute of higher learning, such a belief crosses the threshold from sheer naivety to pure apathy and denial. Let the socialist reformers who would yoke us all to their omnipresent state, either wholly or incrementally, gladly be put to rest. We have learned the lessons of history well. We know the richest men in Wall Street funded your consolidation schemes. We know that what is at stake. We think globally and act locally. We would like history finally to be our servant and not our master. We want at last to be free, and we know finally what this means. What is more, we know finally what this freedom is for, because we know full well the atrocities that take place in its absence. The crucial question we are left with is this: does intelligence emerge holistically, collectively, democratically, through debate and deliberation, natural selection and integration, or should we regard intelligence as merely a kind of authority, the property of those with fine decrees and declarations? It is also a metaphysical question. Does the intelligence in the universe come from a central planner, a God who created everything, or does it emerge spontaneously, naturally, through accumulation and selection over time? Who writes a better encyclopedia, for that matter? A handful of academics or 1,000 fact-checking Wikipedians? Especially with the oversight power of the internet, it seems clear that decentralized intelligence and community autonomy is the way to go, as our various leaders and experts and Platonic guardians are always all too eager to tell us the noble lie and sacrifice our means to their end. The only counterbalance to the monolithic influence of a few state-sponsored giant corporations is the collective contributions of a legion of the poor and disenfranchised who are empowered to withdraw their funds from the corporate and federal coffers and invest it in their own communities. This will only happen when we change our philosophy of the role of government in our lives, as Ron Paul has so often said. As the virtues of the welfare, warfare, corporate state has so far been ingrained in us for decades. Voting a fiscal conservative into office is only the first step. Conservatives must become the new progressives, and that after we reduce the size and scope of government over our lives, we must expand the size and scope of our personal responsibilities. This means new ethical systems and social structures must be tested. Participatory economics, agricultural cooperatives, and anarcho-syndicalist workforces which function as holarchies from the bottom up must be mobilized. The alienation and waste of urban sprawl must be reined in with revitalized urban concentrations. We must once again become neighbors. A new integralism must emerge to cope with our multicultural needs. Once we shrug off the yoke of overconsumption, indebtedness, and taxation, once we take responsibility for ourselves and more money is available on the local level, it will no longer be necessary to patronize slave labor in China as a necessary measure to keep manufacturing costs and inflation low. We can afford to shop at our favorite co-op rather than, say, Walmart. Multinational corporations thrive on inflation. We will cut inflation at the root by returning to sound money and bartering goods that have real intrinsic value. Our paychecks will not be spent before they arrive through looting deductions. There will be a strict separation of economy and state. The lack of corporate subsidies will open them up directly to the demands of the conscious consumer. We will create the demand necessary for sustainable business models and alternative energies that will collapse the state-sponsored monopolies and restore a truly free market of ideas and of goods. If the price of oil is too high, economically or environmentally speaking, we will roll out our electric cars onto the streets and the market will slowly, surely drain the profits from the cartels. We will encourage a new kind of globalization through a free trade that is based on democratic, heterogeneous experimentations and concessions, a loose confederation of sovereign nations who will determine the primacy of their own imports and exports. their own tariffs and subsidies, and the best goods and ideas, be it democracy or hydrogen fuel, will rise to the top of the global market through a natural, spontaneous, holistic process of competing differentiations rather than the top-down management and predetermined distribution of cheap and poisonous corporate goods around the world. We recognize no monopoly on the truth. That is why the borders between individuals and nations must remain as they are at this tenuous stage of our collective existence. History is not done with its lessons. Just as long as we do not overstep our bounds with imperial ambitions, let mass migrations and domestic revolutions be the arbiters of globalization, not some new world order. Lastly, it is not capitalism or privatization per se that is responsible for the reckless pursuit of purely monetary gain or profits we see today. It is the fiat fractional reserve monetary system which encourages suicidal overconsumption and financial capital by issuing a debt-based currency with arbitrary value. It is the Federal Reserve System itself which insulates entire populations in the transient debt credit bubbles that transfer all the wealth and property upward when the currency is inevitably withdrawn to curb the inflation it encourages. Sound money, whether it be the debt-free treasury-issued greenbacks of the Lincoln era or the gold and silver coins authorized by our Constitution, and the bartering of goods with intrinsic value will mean an end to the system of floating representations where the signifier is divorced from the signified and the spectacle determines capital. A non-interventionist foreign policy likewise will be the death knell of the military-industrial complex. But the conservative revolution only begins with Ron Paul. It ends with us.